Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hi, in this week's edition of Ilanomics, we'll talk about how India has started to ease the lockdown and how this will pan out for the Indian economy. I have Professor Ila Patnaik with me. Ila, what are the early indications you are seeing from the way in which the lockdown has been eased in many parts of the country and some kind of economic activity has been initiated?
So first, the number of deaths has not been what was predicted. And even though now the number of deaths is rising, still governments have had to respond by easing lockdowns. It's not happened just in India, but in about 13 countries on beginning 4th of May. Even Italy, which has many more deaths, have started easing. I think the models that were predicting a large number of cases and deaths were based on a certain kind of behavior, both of governments and of individuals, where it was assumed that the virus will spread. But how human beings responded, whether governments responded by shutting down or partly human beings responded by changing their behavior, has meant that the number of deaths has been much less. I think the big fear now that a lot of people have is that today the virus is more widespread than it was on 24th of March when we did the lockdown. Is it that this is just time lost, and is it that it'll start spreading at the same pace again? And I think what economists are predicting there is that no, the spread of the virus may not be as much as prior to the lockdown, because human beings respond to incentives, our behavior responds to information, and so we try to change our behavior, we try to do social distancing, not go to certain places. Governments have already, stepped in, or their behavior, if I take the government as an agent, then their behavior has been to try to impose very strict guidelines and lockdowns. So overall, we are, as a world, as a human species compared to the virus, perhaps in a slightly better position than we were before the lockdown started, because we are far more aware and our behavior will try to keep the virus less.
So you're talking, Ila, about two distinct things in the piece this week, Ilanomics, which is on our website, ThePrint.in, about policy change by policymakers, governments and states, and behavioral change, the behavior you talked about on the part of the people, the individuals. And both of this will have an impact on how the economy recovers and grows, hopefully, going forward.
Right.
Can you sort of expand on that?
Right. So, usually in economics models, what we do is we say there are, different agents, governments, businesses, households, and all of them respond to incentives. Now, if you think about what did governments respond to? Initially, they saw queues, deaths, spreading of the virus, and they stepped in by doing lockdowns. In some place more extreme, in other places less extreme. Now you think about what happened next. Even though the spread came down in some places, it didn't come down in all places. Yet the economic compulsions changed those incentives. Governments saw economies getting devastated, saw tax revenues come down, which really matters because that would help them to cope with the virus or not to cope with it. And so they've started easing these lockdowns while trying to say that we'll change our strategy now from this complete isolating everybody to testing, tracing, isolating, treating, and containment of maybe individuals, families, buildings, clusters, not this widespread lockdown. So in that sense, how governments responded to the changing environment is a part of the response of the human of human beings as a whole.
There is also another very significant point you make, and that in going forward, it's unlikely that we'll see such huge total lockdowns. Why do you say that?
Because of the lessons that governments have learned. Because the lockdowns that we've seen have led to such extreme shutdown of production and consumption that now it's also that it's possible because you've prepared yourselves in terms of medical equipment, testing kits and so on, but also that what you had was so extreme that maybe the cure was worse than the disease, as people say, that it was not something that could be continued. And if we do it again, as initially it was thought, the models in place were that what we might see is lockdown and then easing and lockdown and easing.
On, off.
Successive rounds of that. I think increasingly people are thinking, economists have been working on it. I've made a reference to John Cochrane's work on this, and they are modifying the epidemiological models to make them behavioral SIR models. The transition from people who are susceptible to the infectious to the recovered. Okay, so those are the epidemiological models. And now economists who typically look at incentives are making them more behavioral SIR models, where they are saying that human behavior will change. Human behavior also includes, governments, businesses, individuals. And so if you think of the behavior of governments, it is unlikely that they will go back to that extreme because of the effects of that extreme lockdown, at least nationwide extreme lockdowns. It may be more containment, more clusters. In our case now, for example, in India, we've got 130 districts which are red zones. So because we are in Delhi and we are in a red zone, we don't feel that much of a difference. But there are places which are now green zones, where a lot more has been permitted. So that's really the way human behavior shapes and will shape what is going to come.
And you call this the biggest awareness campaign in the history of humankind.
I mean, look at us. We've talked of nothing except COVID-19
the last several weeks.
For several weeks. So I think, given how much of media presence there is today, official, social, every kind of media, digital, print, WhatsApp, which might spread more misinformation often, all kinds of just sheer awareness of people. After they've been locked down, they know that this is an issue. So information shapes human behavior. In fact, that's why I think that the economy may recover in a manner where business goes to places that are more safe. So if rural areas are more safe in India, then you will find that and people are also going there. They are safer, and 70% of the population is living there. The risk of a business being shut down is lower if you are in a rural area. So that on-off that happens will be less. And so you might find a lot more of, if we have to live with the virus for another, say, year, 2 years, then people would rather be in the safer zones which will not shut down.
But that is the crux of your argument this week, that probably rural India and the rural sector is better placed to not capitalize, but actually recover from this faster than probably the economy based in urban India and urban sectors. But is it that simple, considering over the last few decades the migration has always been from the countryside to the cities, the factories, the service sector, and they have people have lived here now, and the migration has taken place. But how long can people continue to be in the villages? And what kind of opportunities exist in the rural sector?
So first of all, I must say it's not like a 0-1. And it's not that you'll only do urban or you'll only do rural. But what we do understand in India is that the rural sector and agriculture have been distorted, have not seen reform for many decades now. And we did a show on agriculture a few weeks ago where we were talking about how you need to start opening up, you need to have warehouses, infrastructure, the APMC reform is needed. And in fact, now what you're seeing is state government after state government. So I've read news about Punjab has already done it, Madhya Pradesh has already done it, and other states are on their way to doing it, that they are reforming this mechanism where they're allowing private mandis. So there is a lot of scope for reform. It's not that all, we'll all leave the cities and go to villages, but this is an opportunity where and when you can actually promote those because of the need. You see, need and necessity is what drives reform. So at the moment, if people are going to have to stay in villages, maybe because of the fear factor, maybe because that's where it's business, and you'll have some rural demand has actually done well in the last 2 months compared to urban demand. So that's where you opened up first. So this is a time when you can do reforms, and those reforms can actually not absorb everybody, but absorb more. They can be places from where there is higher demand, as well as more high value crops, fruit, vegetables. If once you have cold stores, you have warehouses, you have better infrastructure, you can export more. If you don't have these, we used to have these arbitrary on and offs for exports. So what would happen is that if domestic prices were such that they started going up, then there would be a ban on exports. So, the whole policy framework can be supportive for agriculture. And my sense is this is the time when it is most likely to happen, because that's where people will be, and you do need to generate jobs there. So it's not a one-off, a 1-0-1. It's not a binary. You will have to support dense urban clusters as well. But this is also the time where rural India is far safer. And with better infrastructure and better policies, it can be our strength.
Who would have thought this is also the time that rural India is far safer and it could be a strength of the Indian economy? Thanks for watching this episode of Ilanomics. I would also like to tell you that we have launched the Hindi edition of Ilanomics this week. So please do watch the Hindi edition of Ilanomics, and we will be back next week with another edition in English and Hindi. And also please subscribe to the YouTube channel of The Print. Thank you.